Okay, so we're going to talk about why a rule engine could be useful, how the rule engine is different from some of the other options that are out there in the market space, especially those free ones that you have available in the AdWords interface. And then I'm going to shift into live demo showing you how you can use a pre-built recipe to do CPA, return on ad spend type bidding. And then we'll also create a custom recipe that can replace all the work that you currently do in Excel. And then this is the first of 2 sessions I'm doing on the topic of Rule Engine. Today is kind of the introduction. Next week is going to be the advanced one where we'll take a look at stuff like bidding by weather, bidding by conversion type. But I might give you a sneak peek towards the end about some of those more advanced capabilities that we'll have. Okay, so that's that. So let's get started with the Rule Engine. So why do people even want to have a Rule Engine? Well, it's because everybody nowadays is talking about automating the work that they do in AdWords. We all know that the robots are coming. So, a lot of the work that we do today, we should be able to hand off to the robots to automate so that we can work on more strategic tasks in accounts. So the type of stuff that you can generally automate are the things that you can write down as a process. If you could write it down and give it to someone else to do for you, then you can probably also automate it. Right? So if you can say if X and Y, then do Z. That's what a basic rule engine would be. So in the context of pay-per-click, what this means is we would look for any keyword that had at least 100 clicks and that had a cost per acquisition that was lower than the target that we have of $20. And if that was the case, then we might want to increase the bid by 10%. So that's a very simple example of a rule. Now, this is the type of rule you could do through automated rules in AdWords, but that's basically the context, right? If you can write it down, let's go and figure out a way to automate it. So I'm obviously a big proponent of doing things for free when you don't have to pay for them. So AdWords does have automated rules, and in many cases, that's a great solution to put a rule engine in place. Now, there are a couple of reasons why AdWords solution may not be good enough. So one frustration that I've had is they cannot use multiple date ranges, and you also cannot mix and match different entities. So let me give you a couple of examples of things that you could do through the Optmyzr Rule Engine that would be really difficult, if not impossible, to do in AdWords because of these 2 limitations. So here's one automation that I like to run. So I want to find keywords that are not converting. But I don't just want to find stuff that's not converting. I want to find stuff that used to convert in the past year, but maybe then stopped converting in the last 30 days, because maybe that's indicative of some sort of a problem, some sort of a shift in user behavior. Maybe my landing page has changed. Maybe I changed the ad text. Maybe there's something else I did that caused things that used to convert to stop converting. Now, to put a label on keywords that meet these criteria, you cannot do that in AdWords, because in AdWords, when you build an automated rule, the look back window is one single look back window. So you cannot compare multiple date ranges. So that's one thing I will show you how to do here today with Optmyzr. Now, the second optimization that'd be really difficult to do in AdWords is finding keywords whose CPA is more than 30% higher than the campaign level CPA. Now, this is actually one of my favorite rules that I've built through the rule engine. It's basically a rule that helps you find outliers. The reason I like this rule is that oftentimes I ask customers, what is your cost per acquisition target? Or what is your return on ad spend target? And they say, I can't answer that question. And the reason you can't answer that question is because your cost per acquisition goal for a brand campaign is probably different for a non-brand campaign. And that makes total sense, right? So by asking for a CPA target, you're not actually able to do the right thing for an account. Now, what I believe is that oftentimes campaigns tend to have keywords about the same thing. So most people have a brand campaign and some non-brand campaigns. So what we could now do is we could look at what is the cost per acquisition of the campaign historically, right? So what has it been performing at? And now let's go and find outlier keywords that are not within the realm of what we would consider normal for that campaign. So within a brand campaign, we're going to judge the keywords more stringently than if it was a non-branded keyword in a non-brand campaign. But we're just finding things within a campaign scope that are more than 30% more expensive. And so this ability to look at a keyword's cost per acquisition and compare it to a campaign level cost per acquisition, that's another unique thing that can lead to some very interesting rules, but you can't really do it using the AdWords automated rules. Now, the bid rule engine that we have here, most people use it to do bid management. So why not use portfolio bid strategies instead? Now, bid strategies from Google are great. Google has a ton of data, so there's many situations in which you actually might want to consider using Google's options. Now, the reasons why sometimes it doesn't work is that Google requires a ton of data. And not only do they require a lot of data, but they also require that data to be relatively fresh, right? So like 15 conversions every 30 days before they can really start setting bids. Now, maybe you have really low volume campaigns that over the span of the last 6 months have gotten a decent volume, and you could probably make some decisions based on that 6 months worth of data, but that's just not how Google works. So Google will not be able to do anything because they consider the data to be too sparse. Now, when you use the Google system, you have the black box. That's what you see on the left. So Google, you go to them and you say, my target cost per acquisition is $20. Some stuff happens inside of a black box. You have no clue what's happening, and some new bids come out of it. Now, nobody cares about the black box when the bids that come out of it are working. But if for some reason the bids all of a sudden aren't so great anymore and the performance is going down, you really would want to look inside the black box and understand what factors is Google considering. Are they maybe missing something that I know about my business that they should have taken into consideration? And that's what you see in the blue cloud on the right side. So what we have at Optmyzr is a transparent calculation. So in this transparent calculation, you know how we're deriving the new bids. And if you find that we should have been looking at more data, maybe something unique to your business, you can actually bring in your business data and use that on top of everything else to come out with new, better bids. Also, if you're an agency and you're doing bid management on behalf of your clients, now, obviously, the client cares about having the best results. If you have a black box system like the one Google has, if all of a sudden those results are not there anymore, you as the agency, your hands are tied. You can't really go and do anything about it other than turn off the bid automation from Google. And now you're in a place where everything has to be manual again. That's probably going to be fairly painful for your business because it's going to be a big investment of time. Time is money, right? You're only charging the client so much, so you might actually start losing money on that client. So that's why I think the tools that we have here at Optmyzr are actually very worthwhile considering. Now, let's wrap up here before I go into the live demo, but what a typical optimization looks like or should look like. And this is going to illustrate why we built the rule engine in the first place. So if you have a typical optimization, the account manager goes and spends 30 minutes downloading a bunch of reports. Google, unfortunately, doesn't have one report that gives you everything. So if you wanted to compare keyword data to campaign data, that right there means pulling a couple of different reports. If you want to look at multiple date ranges, again, you have to pull additional reports. You might pull 4 reports to do a basic optimization. Now you got 4 reports. These individually are not useful. So the next step is you go and do a bunch of VLOOKUPs and processing in the spreadsheet to come up with some consolidated data where every keyword now has one row on the spreadsheet. So the CPC 7-day data and the campaign level CPC data, everything has been brought into a single row thanks to the VLOOKUP. So you just spent another 15 minutes doing that. Now, if you made a mistake and you realize that one of your reports underlying this was wrong, you have to go all the way back to the left side, spend another couple of minutes downloading and redoing your whole VLOOKUP. So it's kind of painful. And then the final part of the process is now that everything is nicely on one row, you can actually use those data points to calculate what your new bid should be. So maybe you decide based on the data for this one keyword that using formulas, the new bid should come out to a 10% increase. Okay, so that's what a typical optimization looks like. That's what a lot of people do. They spend a lot of time in Excel doing VLOOKUPs, building formulas, populating the spreadsheet with the freshest data, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of all a bit of a waste of time. So that's why we came up with the rule engine. So let me go out of presentation mode here, and we'll switch into the Optmyzr rule engine. Okay, so if anyone is not able to see this portion, go ahead and let me know in the question section, but it looks on my end like we're now looking at the rule engine. Okay, so the rule engine sits inside of Optmyzr under the optimizations tab, right there under rule engine. So I'm going to go into viewing all of the rules. If you've never used this, this is going to be mostly a blank menu, but you are going to have the view all option. And again, this is only available for pro and enterprise level customers. So if you're not at that level, shoot us an email and we'll upgrade you for a couple of weeks so you can see exactly how this rule engine works. Now, this is my account. I've got quite a few rules already set up. A lot of these rules were just for testing. You might start off with a blank slate. If you have that blank slate, the easiest way to get it kicked off is to use an instant recipe. Now, an instant recipe, these are a bunch of recipes and rules that we've already built for our customers, so that you can just select from one of these, tell us a few pieces of information, and be up and running very quickly. So I promised we would look at doing target cost per acquisition and target return on ad spend, so you can choose from those menu items. Also notice, you may not have all of these menu items on your screen. This is sort of my development interface, but you will have target CPA and target ROAS as options. So let me click target CPA, and now you see that within target CPA, there's a couple of different rules that you can choose from. One thing to notice is here on the right side of each little section, it tells you what the rule runs on. So let's, for example, go and find an ad group level rule like this one, and we're going to do a target CPA for ad groups based on a static look back window. So we're not committing to anything here, but we can select it, put in a couple pieces of information, and then we'll see exactly what it's doing. And then once we're happy with it, that's when we can decide to keep this. Okay, but so first things first, we can give this a name. So this is, I'm just going to leave it as is, but target CPA for ad groups. I have to answer a couple of questions now. So what is the target CPA that I'm trying to hit? So let's say it was $20. The next question is, how many conversions should something have before we consider it statistically significant? Now, you probably want to put in higher numbers, but I'm just going to put in one. So as soon as anything has one conversion, we're going to use that conversion rate to help us set the new CPC bid. What's nice here is that if you have a smaller account and you want to look at less data than the 15 conversions that Google requires, you can actually do that. You can put in your own number here. And then what is the minimum bid that we want to set? So let's put that at 10 cents, and the highest bid we're going to put at $10. And then I hit the button next, and now I'm going to be adding this, right? So now I can add a recipe just for this account, or I can do a global recipe, which means that this recipe is going to become available for all of my accounts. Now, because this recipe has a specific cost per acquisition target, it probably makes sense just to have this recipe for this account. And then I can make copies of it for different accounts where I can set different cost per acquisition targets. But that's basically what this is. So this account or all accounts through a global recipe. Okay, so now that I've added this, it puts it at the bottom of this list here. Let's do two things. I'm going to start up a window which is previewing the suggestions. So in the background, we're going to be calculating all of the new bids. But while it's doing that, let me show you exactly what the logic is. So actually, the logic here is very simple. So what we do is we say we're going to analyze all ad groups in this account. We're going to start with the first ad group, and we're going to take a look to see if it meets these conditions. The conditions are if the conversions for the ad group over the last 30 days were greater than or equal to the minimum number of conversions, which happens to be 1. So that was the value that I just put into my settings. So if it's greater than or equal to 1, then I want to calculate my CPC bid based on the ad group level data for the target CPA and the conversions and the clicks it got over the last 30 days. That's it. It sets the bid with that information. Now, let me show you a little bit of how you could change this. Okay, so all of these things are clickable. You can click on this, and now you can see that we're setting the bid. We can increase the bid, decrease it. We can change the status of something, or we can also attach a label to something. But here we're doing bid setting. When I click on the bids that we're going to set, I can choose from a number of things. So I can either set it to a constant number. I can set it to, in this case, an expression. So an expression is basically a formula. And as you will probably recognize, the formula to calculate CPC when you know conversion rates and your target cost per acquisition is this. So you take your target cost per acquisition and you multiply it by your conversion rate. That's going to be your CPC bid. Now, this is fully editable, right? So if I wanted to do another multiplication in here and I wanted to bring in something like impression share, I don't know exactly why I would do that in this scenario, but I can, right? So I can build out my formulas exactly the way I want to do it. The custom variables, so the things like the target cost per acquisition, the minimums, etc., these are all available for use across the rule engine as custom variables. So if I wanted to put target CPA in here, which we've already done, it sits in here as a variable. This is nice because what some people might do is they might say, well, I have a $20 cost per acquisition target. So they hard code it. Okay, they put that $20 number right there. But next month, if you change your target CPA goal, now you'd have to come back into all of these rules to change that number. So you have to type in whatever the new number was. By using a custom variable, target CPA, I can change that value as a variable for the whole rule. And any place where it's being used is automatically going to update with that. Okay, so that's how you do this. Now, this is the preview. So the new bids that are being suggested based on this methodology are exactly these. So you can see the campaign, the ad group. In case where we have multiple rules, we will show you which rule it matched against. We will show you the old CPC bid. We will tell you the new CPC bid. And then we also tell you some additional data. So in this case, how many conversions it had over the past 30 days. So you can really look at this data to make sure that the bid rules are working the way that you wanted it to, and it's making the changes that you want it to. This kind of works like a one-click optimization. So if you're happy with these bid changes, you can do an instant apply, and it's actually going to push these live into your account. If you only wanted to do it for certain campaigns, you could scope it down right here, and now I would only be making the changes to this campaign. So instant apply is what that's for. If you're happy with this and you just want to put it onto a fully automatic schedule, you can click on Automate, and we will have an estimate here of the cost involved with scheduling it on a certain frequency. So there's a little bit of extra server infrastructure that we have to run to be able to do this full automation. So if you really just want to walk away from this thing and have Optmyzr do it for you, you can put it on a schedule. But just know that this is the additional cost that would be scheduled to you on a monthly basis. It would just be added to your invoice. So that's how a target cost per acquisition rule works. Now let's go back and let's set up a target return on ad spend rule. And let me take a quick look here, make sure there are no questions. So if anyone does have questions, please do ask them. But hopefully this is all making sense so far. So let's add another instant recipe. This time we're going to look at target return on ad spend. This time let's do one for ad groups, but let's use a dynamic look back window. So this one right here. So it's fairly similar to the CPA rule that we had, right? So here we're going to have a 150% return on ad spend target. So, and by the way, these little explainers tell you exactly what numbers to put in. So we're going to keep the min and the max at the same levels. I'm going to go next for this account. And now all the way at the bottom, we have this new target return on ad spend rule. This account doesn't actually have conversion value data, so this wouldn't produce much. But let me show you what the rule itself looks like. So now you can see there's actually a little bit more complex things going on. So with the dynamic look back window, we look at an increasing time frame for when we have enough data. So we're asking the question, does this ad group have at least the minimum conversions over the span of 7 days? If that is not the case, then we go on to consider the next rule in that sequence. So now we look at 14 days. And then we look at 30 days. Now, if at 30 days we have that one conversion data point, then we're going to take the action that's defined in here. So we would take the 30-day conversion rate history to inform the new bid that we have. At that point, if we have made a change, then we quit. Then we don't go on to the next rule. Then we go back to the top and we start evaluating the next entity, in this case, the next ad group. Now, if we get all the way to the bottom of the list and even at 90 days, we don't have enough conversions, then we're done with this one ad group. And again, we loop back to the top and we start evaluating the next ad group. Now, this is very important because you cannot have an ad group have this action happening and then also this action happening. If you wanted to do multiple actions, you actually can. You can just add an additional action. A fairly common one that people might want to do is attach some sort of a label. So we put in something like change by Optmyzr. Okay, boom. And so now if this condition is being met, then this action will be to change the bid and also apply a label. So you can do as many of these actions as you need. So that's how all of that works. So let's go and take a look at the rule settings. So if I wanted to change my targets, again, notice how I did that, but I just went to the settings of the recipe. So let me go back. So go into the settings of the recipe. This is where I can change my target. So if I realize that I had incorrectly put in my target return on ad spend, I can come back and I can change that anytime I need. If you want to extend this rule and you want to have additional custom variables, you can just add them right there. Now, by default, this was going to run on everything. But if you said my target return on ad spend is 170%, but this is only for my ad groups that are brand, you can add a condition which says the label of those ad groups that we're going to consider has to have these labels attached to them. Or you can also say doesn't have the following labels. Additionally, we typically only execute rules on things that are active. If you wanted to make changes for things that were currently not active, you can also change these statuses right here. But for the most part, we'll consider something that's not currently active, something that may not be running anymore. So we don't want to waste time making bid changes or status changes for those types of things. So that's how all of that works. Okay, so these are your pre-built recipes. These are really the easiest way to get started with some recipes for the account. Now, I set up these recipes for my original test account. If I wanted to copy a recipe I'd already set up somewhere else, I can copy from a different account. So that's a quick way to leverage all the work you've done building something out to quickly copy it to a different place. Once you make a copy, by the way, that does become a copy, right? So let's say here that I was looking at this specific account and I was using this recipe, it actually does make a copy of that. So now whatever settings I have in here, that actually becomes a standalone thing. So this one doesn't have settings, but this becomes a standalone. It is no longer connected to the other recipe. That, by the way, is what global recipes are for. So if you look in Rule Engine here, any global recipe, no matter which account I'm looking at in Optmyzr, my global recipes are going to be in here. And these global recipes, they have the same settings across all of the accounts that use them. On a per account basis, I can also have some favorite recipes. So these are my favorite, my starred ones. So let's take a look here at the all recipe page for this account. Okay, so this globe icon, that denotes a global recipe. If I change this, I'm changing it for every account in Optmyzr. The starred ones, these are just the ones that are favorites in this account. So if I make this one a starred one and I go back to my menu for Rule Engine, notice that now we have 5 favorite recipes. So that just makes them easier to access in the accounts where you most often use these recipes. Okay, so let me wrap up here with adding a recipe from scratch. So the pre-built recipes, that's really about getting you started very quickly. You can still customize all of those things. But if you really wanted to build a recipe from scratch, this is what you would do. So you would say what item you're acting on. So it could be product groups, by the way. So any of you doing shopping ads, you can also automate shopping ads. But let's grab keyword here for a second. So again, you can say whether we were filtering this, what status we're using. I could make some custom variables. So if I knew I wanted to do something related to, target ad rank, for example, I can type in target rank. I could give it a description, and then I could put in a value. So target lowest ad rank, maybe I make that a 3. Okay, so that's in there now. So then I continue on to the next step. And this one I need to delete. There we go. Okay, so now I can proceed. So now it says this is a rule that runs on all keywords of this account. And so I get to make my first if this, then that type of condition. So if certain conditions are met, then something's going to happen. So for these conditions, I can pick from attributes at the keyword level, performance data at the keyword level, conversion data, attribution, competitive metrics, and then custom variables. So the custom variables, that's the thing that I just put into the settings, and this would be my lowest ad rank. So in this sort of scenario, I would want to look at my average position. And if that average position was numerically greater than my custom variable, target lowest ad rank, then I would want to do something. You can also add multiple conditions, so I can just click here to do another condition. Notice, by the way, you can choose the scope. So even though I'm making keyword changes, I could look at the data from the campaign or the account or the ad group level. So I could say if the campaign in which this keyword lives meets certain conditions, like it has a certain label attached to it, then that's when we want to take some action. Okay, so the label is also equal to this. What is my action? So I just click on here, and again, very simple. I can do increase or decrease bids. In the most advanced scenario, I would do a bid setting. Now, even though we're evaluating keywords here, I could actually, sorry, if I was doing an ad group level change, I could actually put the bids down to the keyword level. So this is where you could choose from that. But here's where I set my bids. So the bids could be a constant number, could be based on a new metric, so something like current bid. But most likely people do want to do an expression. So they might say, take an attribute like what is my bid at this moment, and then increase that by some sort of value. So let's increase the bids by 10 cents, 0.1. Okay, and so that's my new bid formula. Then I can also do min and max bids. These can be constant. So a lot of people will just put this at like a penny as 0.01. So penny as the lowest. But you could also make this an expression again, right? So you could say my expression, I never want to bid higher than say 2 times whatever my current bid is. Or maybe a smarter one would be to do something that says, maybe I want to look at my first page bid or top of page bid, right? So I never want to go higher than the top of page bid plus something like $1. Okay, so that's how you put that in. So pretty flexible in terms of how you can set this up. And then you can add more rules, right? So if this condition is not met, you want to add another rule. Again, you just build one of these and quickly get all of that together. Now, if you want to make a variation of this, you can duplicate this. So now it's really easy because now I can basically just go in and I can turn around this condition. So if I was in a position that was numerically lower than my my other targets, so say that I want it to be between 2 and 3. So if I was higher than 2, then I want to decrease my bid. So then I would edit this, come in here, put my cursor where I want it, change the calculation, minus, enter a number, 0.1. Okay, and we're done. And so now we have kind of like a bid to position type rule. So relatively easy to build out. So that's the rule engine in a nutshell. So I see there's a question here. So it's a question about the cost. So I'll come back to that in just a second. But that's how the rule engine works. So the other things that I'll cover in the webinar next week is the more advanced settings. So how could you do things like bidding by weather or bidding based on the conversions by different types, right? So if you don't want to look at your cost per acquisition for all conversions, but you wanted to look at your cost per acquisition just for one type of conversion, how could you do something like that? So the way that we can do that is by bringing in additional data through a Google spreadsheet. So we have one sample rule here, which is increasing bids when it rains. And basically the way that we're able to do something like that is by having a Google spreadsheet, which I will show you. But in that spreadsheet, what we've done is we've listed out all of the campaigns for which we want to change bids. And then we've put in a zip code that's associated with each of these campaigns. We're using a free API to pull in the weather data in these locations. So we know the current weather condition, we know the current temperature. And then what's really cool is you'll be able to go into the rule engine. So you go into the rule engine right here. Okay, so now you can see that rather than doing simple stuff that's based off of attributes and conditions in AdWords, I can actually pull in some of my spreadsheet data. So I can say if my current weather condition is equal to light rain, that's when I want to do some sort of a change. So it really opens up a lot of different capabilities to run these rules. So back